1701 Hunting. There's something pleasantly sinister about my newly developed stealth method. I can still remember back in the old days when I would huddle against the roof of the tunnel, stealth activated, desperately trying to avoid detection as I moved around in the first stratum. My new technique is a little different. Using gravity magic, I lift myself off the ground, legs tucked up under my carapace, and silently float along, making no sound whatsoever. Meanwhile, my minds are dedicated to hiding every trace of my mana, concealing the power in my core and helping me vanish from mana sense. I dub it, Ant Submarine Mode. I have become a submarinant. Gway hey 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 hey. Obviously, anyone can just look up and see the giant floating ant. I'm not concealing my appearance in any way, but by the time they can see me, it's already too late. It's an interesting experience, going through the dungeon like this. Monsters go out of their way to avoid me. If they smell me coming, or just catch sight of me, rather than launch out of their burrows in a mindless rage like they did before, they duck their heads, dive into their burrows or slink into the shadows, desperate to avoid being seen. Obviously, I won't let this go to my head. Doing so would be dangerous, and risk awakening the Dark One. Instead, I allow myself a quiet chuckle of victory as I keep my senses attuned for my real targets. I'm not out here to track down monsters, after all, I'm here for a more interesting prey. I've left Tiny, Nvidia and Chrysalis back at the nest for the time being. There's no need for the delvers to get a glimpse of them just yet, but they do need to get a glimpse of me. After all, if I'm hiding in the nest, nobody is going to try their hand at capturing me. I have to be out and about, vulnerable and exposed. Well, as vulnerable and exposed as I can be when I'm so incredibly powerful. Ahem. Oh, what's this? I slow my ominous glide through the air and sit for a moment, antennae waving. Delvers are more competent than I gave them credit for when I first started this escapade. I hate to give them credit, but I'm not too surprised my siblings were struggling against them. Without enough ants, they were forced to operate in smaller groups, perfect targets for the delvers. Excellent at moving through the tunnels and remaining undetected, the delvers are sneaky creatures, deploying an immense number of techniques and methods to remain concealed. However, they have no idea that they each have their own tiny, infinitesimal gravitational field. So weak as to be effectively undetectable, unless you happen to be a monster specifically evolved and developed to find them. How many are there? 10, 20, 30, 40. My, it seems some quick-thinking individuals put together a team to try and claim wealth beyond imagining before anyone else could. Perfect. I begin my forward momentum once more, silently gliding through the air, held up by the gravity well that I maintain with my will. The Golgari did a better job than I gave them credit for. My sub-brains are humming along beautifully, whipping together the mind constructs which are more numerous and more powerful than ever before. Flexing my mental might has never felt this satisfying. Even the hard-to-manage gravity mana is like putty in my hands. Now, at what point are these cowards going to launch their assault? I know you're there, you little scamps. Is there a trap? There has to be a trap, right? No way 40 of you thought you would be good enough to take me on directly. What have you got set up? As I drift forward, it doesn't take long for me to find out. Detonations ring out in series, above and below. Light flashes, stone rumbles and the ground gives way below my position. Not that I care, I'm floating over here. What's more concerning is the thousands of tons falling down from above. Well, I don't really care about that either. There isn't enough power in the gravity well to hold up all this stone for more than a few seconds, but that's all I really need. I drift forward, then unfold my legs and set myself down on the ground while I use the well to hold up the rock. OVE diaresis. Once I'm clear, I let the well dissipate and a thundering roar echoes through the tunnel as the stone ceiling collapses behind me. Shards fly everywhere, bouncing off my carapace as the tunnel fills with dust and debris. I half expect the delvers to slink away since their trap has failed to have any effect, but it appears their blood is up, thank goodness. Spells and sword light fly towards me through the clouds of dust, and I angle my carapace to deflect the blows. I have to say, not having to worry about something going straight through my eyeballs and into my brain is a great comfort and makes warding off these blows a heck of a lot easier than it was before. I've been testing these eyes out, and while they aren't as tough as my carapace, not by a mile, they're still surprisingly durable. As the first strikes land, I feel my regeneration network kick in, a trickle of healing fluid flowing through my system. Antennae waggling, I can feel my opponents moving through the dust, can sense their attacks even before they happen. My body moves on pure instinct, reacting before I have time to think, or even process. Minute adjustments, shifting my position and angle, not letting the strikes hit me straight on, always an angle, always a deflection. I parry a powerful wave of sword light with my mandibles and charge forward. My opponents give ground before me, not wanting to be caught in a direct confrontation. Even if I can't see them, I know where they are, small groups of 5 or 6 spaced in a rough half circle in front of me. Mana flares from my left and I twist, moving with shocking speed for a monster of my size. A beam of sizzling light spears through the dust cloud, clipping me along my right flank. Youch! That's hot. They try to redirect the beam onto my head, but my mandibles are open wide. Sensing what's coming, they let the spell fade and try to retreat. I don't think that's going to help. Starcrusher. Chapter 1702 Harder, better, faster, stronger. I'm sure they expected me to retaliate, but I'm not sure they expected something like this. My chomp sucks in the gathered dust, eliminating the cloud and revealing the scrambling delvers in front of me. They've got a bit of space, and a shield up by the looks of things. Hopefully, it'll be enough. Boom. The forming sphere of light shatters between my jaws and the explosion sends a shockwave rolling outwards. And, for a change, I'm totally fine. My eyes don't explode, my carapace doesn't get damaged, nothing happens. Well, not to me. Maybe I can deploy the empowered version without getting hurt. That will be a change of pace. Fire rolls outwards and the delvers cry out in fear as they fall back. Light strikes at my back as the others try to distract me, pull my attention away from the vulnerable members. As if that's going to work. You think I'm some sort of mindless monster? I'm going to attack the person who attacked me last. Get real. My regeneration network is really kicking into gear now, winding up faster and faster, sending healing fluid roaring through my system. I have to give the delvers a bit of credit, they are doing a bit of damage. My carapace is incredibly tough and they aren't close to getting through it, but little chips here and there are still happening, especially around my joints. However, it simply doesn't matter. With so much regeneration fluid flooding my system, those small nicks are healed exceptionally fast. My HP is completely full, my carapace is effectively undamaged, and I'm not even tired. I was wondering what Granin was on about when he asked about my fatigue after I told him about the incident with Tiny, so I'm being mindful of my stamina, but it's just not going down. With so much will pouring into me, it's almost impossible for me to get tired, even if I wanted to. There are millions of ants in range, literally millions. I can do this all day. Stalking forwards, I examine the aftermath of my chomp and find the delvers managed to survive, but they aren't in great shape. Their shield wasn't enough to protect them and they were knocked down by the blast, but they aren't out of the fight completely. Even as I loom over them, they try to recover, flipping back onto their feet and dashing away, taking the more heavily injured members with them. I let them go. They can't get away from me, and something else has taken my attention for the time being. I know I said I wouldn't get distracted, but what the heck is going on over there? The story has been taken without consent. If you see it on Amazon, report the incident. With the dust cloud gone, I can see more clearly, and nestled between 2 stalagmites is a small group of 3 delvers who don't seem to be attacking like the others, so I'd ignored them up to this point. Yet, they're suspiciously blank to my other senses. No mana is leaking through at all, which means they must be hiding it for some reason. In fact, as I look closer and reach out with my mana sense, I can make out the layers of wards they've placed around themselves. Not a few either, there must be a dozen. Why? Unaware that I'm looking straight at them, the 3 delvers are concentrating, pooling their mana into some sort of spell that I don't recognize. I can't sense the mana at all, naturally, but why the heck are they doing this right out in the open? I can see you. Why go through the trouble of hiding every trace of your presence but perform the spell where I can see you? Maybe these delvers aren't as professional as I thought. As nice as it would be to let them finish whatever they have planned, I think I might intervene before they launch a death laser to cut me in half or something. Blows continue to rain down on me, but they just aren't enough to crack through my carapace or outpace the runaway freight train of my regeneration. Under the manipulations of my upgunned minds, the omni-elemental construct spins and churns, pumping out dense water mana which I swiftly weave into a jet of water. Whatever they were planning on doing, it appears as though it's difficult to accomplish while being subjected to a water cannon. Knocked down and struggling, the spell fizzles out as the groups continue to try and catch my attention, striking at my back and flanks with a sudden frenzy. Yeesh, lay off already. My regeneration network is going absolutely crazy. They weren't kidding when they said the regeneration gland would only continue to ramp up. It's not stopping, it's only getting stronger and stronger. Are there limits on this thing? I'm starting to feel pressurized from the inside. Alright, enough playing around. This has been fun, but I can't hang around here all day. I've got things to be doing, and more delvers to hunt for. With a flex of my will, an empowered gravity domain is unleashed, expanding outwards rapidly to crush everything caught within its grip. In an instant, the fighting is over. No more spells, no more sword slashes, only face-planted delvers trying to breath through a foot of solid rock. Gway-hey-hey, I can't say it ever gets tiring, looking at them squirm. I whip together a mind bridge so I can force it on them and talk to them, but something catches my eye first. Even better hidden than the delvers hiding behind the rocks, even more concealed than Enid's retirement savings, there is something over there catching the light. Marching closer, I realize it's a person, smushed into the rock and struggling to free themselves, just like the others, but for some reason they are completely invisible to almost all of my senses. In the hubbub of the fight, I must have lost track of their gravitational field as well. So sneaky. What I find really interesting, though, what really seizes my interest, is the lovely Church of the Path robes the figure is wearing. I snap the bridge into place. I've just been dying to talk to one of you. The priest seems less enthused. 1703 The first captive. What should I do? Should I cook him? Slowly roast this priest while turning him over a spit? Or boiling? Boiling is good. The flavor of evil and corruption will permeate the water and we can use it to poison the wells at Green Mountain. Oh, I haven't felt this alive since the traitorous worm was captured. I'm so free. Muahahahahaha. Anthony, this is a priest of the path. You need to stop prodding him with your antenna. What? How dare Morelia try to reduce this creature's torment? Nothing shall cause the poking to cease. Yes, yes. The priest looks very uncomfortable, and also deeply terrified, as I continue to give him sharp pokes with my antenna. Will it be the left, or will it be the right? The left. Muahahaha. And now, the right. As I jolt him from side to the side, the priest can do nothing but tremble with fear. Well, there may be loud protesting as well, but I'm not listening. In fact, now that's come to this, I shall poke with both antennae at the same time. That's enough. It isn't Morelia who intervenes this time, but Chiron, stepping in the way and knocking my antennae aside. Which stings, by the way. Those are sensitive organs. I have to work hard to keep them out of harm's way during combat, and now people keep hitting them. You know what these priests do to monsters, don't you, Chiron? It's not a question. I know that the Legion and the Church have a relatively cozy relationship. Not that anyone in the world seems to get along perfectly well with the Abyssal Legion. They're so stubborn and unbending that literally everyone seems to have had issues with them at some point in history. You're telling me you'll let them do that to my siblings, but you can't stand to watch one get mildly inconvenienced by my antennae. It's outrageous. What do you mean, mildly inconvenienced? Look at the man. I've been looking all this time. Oh, whoops. Perhaps I was a little too enthusiastic with my pokes. The priest's face is swollen and bruised, and it seems as though his arm might be broken. I did not intend to do that. If you'd actually hit him with both antennae, he'd be dead, Chiron snaps at me. Well, I do feel a little bad. I think I was perhaps a little blinded by my entirely justified rage. My bad. I wasn't trying to actually hurt him. Much. I don't think anyone is going to find that very convincing, Morelia mutters in my head. You three don't seem all that interested in defending the delvers that I caught. What about them? You aren't actively breaking them apart, Morelia points out with admittedly flawless logic. Bah, fine, I'll leave this priest alone, but we aren't selling him back like we are the others. The colony will keep this guy, and every other priest we capture. That's not a good idea. Not Morelia this time, but Chiron. She gives her usual, grizzled stare, and I know exactly why. It's a terrible look, it'll stir up tension, it'll give excuses, and it makes us look like unruly monsters. I get it. Chiron might want me and every other ant to be destroyed, but she'd rather we didn't cause too much of a disruption in the process of being obliterated. If the Legion wasn't already stretched to the limit trying to hold the dungeon down through these repeated waves and rising mana levels, they would have smashed the colony by sending 5 legions rather than the one they did manage to attack us with. And that had nearly been enough. We won't keep them forever, but we are going to extract something meaningful from the Church if they want them back. I refuse to release these people, and I use that term reluctantly, without getting value. Behind me, the rest of the captives are being sorted by my siblings. Tiny stands over them, staring hard at each and every delver who walks past him, no doubt a flurry of ghost fists heading their way each second. For some reason, the delvers are reluctant to meet his eyes, can't imagine why. Honestly, they're getting much better treatment than they deserve. They've been captured by the very monsters they came to hunt, and get to walk away once we get paid for them. If that isn't the sort of big-hearted forgiveness that Pengara wants to see, then I don't know what is. They sure wouldn't have extended the same courtesy to one of us. If I'm being totally honest, though, we aren't treating them entirely well. How dare you profane that which is sacred? Heathens, repentance is your only way to the true path. I decided to let Bane and his crew take charge of the prisoners. He's currently welcoming them with a truly thunderous greeting delivered, for some reason, about 2 centimeters from their faces. The other ant-robed members of his clergy are lashing the delvers with cuddly ant toys and clacking at them with these strange wooden mandibles. Wait, have they created a wooden facsimile of our mandibles to try and recreate the sound we make while chomping? They have. There's no hope for these people. You must be scourged to release the foulness in your spirits. Lash them, brothers and sisters. Lash them with the formica of shame. I have no idea what he's on about, and I don't want to. That lousy priest fell over foaming at the mouth the second he saw me, and I have completely refused to let him speak with me since. The power of his voice is enough to rattle my antennae. I don't even want to know what his pheromones skill can do to them now that he's had so much time to practice with it. At least there's no reason for him to go blasting me straight in the brain with that volume again. I'll talk to him when he calms down. Maybe. 1704 Wheeling and Dealing. Eldest, do you really intend to sell the delvers back to Green Mountain? Of course, why wouldn't I? Sloane seems to have reservations about my strategy. Won't they just come back again? After putting up with the priests for a few weeks? Probably not. If they do, it's good, I say. Why would it be good? The general replies, obviously confused. Because then we can capture them again, I point out. Which means we can sell them again. I'm no expert in history, but from what I know, the best way to stop a fight is to make it too expensive to continue. If capturing ants isn't a path to riches and fortune, but debt and misery, then nobody will come looking for us, no matter how much the church wants to pay. Well, if you insist on doing it this way, we can only go along with you. I've done as you asked and found someone who will manage the negotiations for the colony. They'll be here in a few minutes. In that case, I should finish up my meal. Thanks, Sloane, I appreciate your help. Wait, where the heck did my food go? I swear I had more of this biomass left. Tiny, turn around. The giant ape has his back to me. Unable to refuse my direct order, he slowly turns to face me, revealing his bulging cheeks. You can't be that hungry, I've been bringing biomass back for you, haven't I? He manages to choke down the enormous mouthful of food and has the decency to look somewhat shamed. Sheesh, he might be getting older and wiser in some ways, but he's still a very greedy boy. Before I can scold him too much, I feel a mind bridge reach out to me and I allow it to snap into place. Anna B., eldest, I have brought the negotiating team here to speak with you. Sure, let them in. A few moments later, I am treated to a very welcome sight indeed. Enid, I cheer, clacking my mandibles happily as the old woman enters the chamber. My word, she's so small. I crouch down low, finally flattening myself out and lying down to make myself as small as possible, but she still looks incredibly tiny to me. I didn't get that big, did I? Enid, I relay over the bridge, have you shrunk? What? No, well, sort of. I'm sitting down, you silly ant. She is. I see it now, she's in a chair with wheels. A wheelchair. Of course, I remember those. Luckily the floor of this chamber is nice and flat. A small ant is behind the old human, pushing the chair forward while gripping the back carefully with her mandibles, but my attention is focused on the retired merchant. Did the healers start slacking or something? You're supposed to be getting healed every day. I am getting healed every day, she tells me, looking grumpy. Much like a healer, to be honest. I'm old, not sick. Your legs don't work anymore. Well enough to kick nosy insects who won't stop asking about my legs. I've been walking too much lately and my joints are sore. Now be quiet about that and greet me properly. I feel like every time I see Enid, the less care she has for the things that don't really matter. No more platitudes and pleasantries. Someone who loved getting down to business, seemingly over anything else. Hello, Enid, I say, extending an antenna towards her, gently. It's nice to see you again. How have you been? Well enough, I suppose, for an old chook. She reaches out one frail hand to rest against my extended antenna and peers up at me. Was it really necessary for you to get this big? I can remember when you were small enough to fit under my dinner table. I still could if you built a big enough table. You can't even blame me for this one, I wasn't responsible. Which is entirely true. Alright, hold that pillar you call an antenna there for a second and help me up. With a little effort, she grasps hold of a hair and pulls herself up, grimacing as she does so. After a moment, she's up on her feet, hands on her hips. There, see, no problem at all. Strong as an ox, I tell her. Can we double the amount of healers taking care of Enid? I ask the nearby ants, and they nod. I see how healthy you are, yet I'm surprised you volunteered to go negotiate with the Green Mountain for us. I thought you were retired from all of this. After you negotiated with the Brathian, I thought you would never forgive me for dragging you into that mess. I may never, Enid chuckled. But you were right, I am retired from such things. I didn't come here to negotiate with anyone on your behalf. Oh, if not you, then who will? My student, Merchant. Say hello. The small ant who was pushing the wheelchair steps out from behind it and skitters towards me, giving me a sight of her for the first time. What in the name of heck am I looking at? Since when has an ant ever looked this dapper? Greetings. And well met, eldest, the little ant says smoothly. How's business? 1705 slicker than an eel bathing in olive oil with buttered soap and a wax body wash. Just, what is going on here? The ant in front of me is unlike anything I've seen before. Fancy looking clothing, gold jewelry, glasses. It's not over the top, but it's enough to create an image of affluence and sophistication that, unless I'm mistaken, an ant simply does not need. What's your deal? I ask this strange little creature. My deal? I have so many of those. We can talk about them one at a time if you want, or, if you prefer, I can select a few premium offerings from my portfolio. I have a few things that spring to mind immediately. Have you considered a tasteful robe for public settings? The diplomatic corps are reporting great success from the latest line. She really is small, possibly only tier 4, but she talks, not quickly, not like vibrant at all, but smoothly. Effortless patter that flows like drizzled honey onto my antennae, and for a moment, I wonder if I might actually want to put a ridiculous carpet on my back. I flick my attention toward Enid and see she is watching me very closely, leaning on her walking stick as she observes my reaction. She said this was her student. Clearly the colony has born another champion, because no normal ant would ever do anything like this. I don't want one of your rugs, I want you to tell me who you are and what you do. Lying flat on the ground, I'm as low as I can get, and I still tower over Enid and this little ant. Hopefully she doesn't say anything silly, one thwack will probably crush her to the floor. A carpet, please. This weave is spun by the finest artisans in the colony using only silk from the glowworm fields of the 4th stratum. The Carmado are going crazy over the quality, I assure you. I prod her with an antenna. Did I ask you to sell me a matter to introduce yourself? She doesn't miss a beat, sweeping the glasses from her eyes with a smooth gesture and executing an extremely complicated 6-legged curtsy. You must forgive me, I am simply passionate about the things my siblings create. My name is Merchant, and I have been studying the art of commerce under Mistress Ruther while you've been sleeping. Well, I suppose that explains a lot. She looks the part of a merchant, and she certainly seems to have learned a thing or two about selling stuff. What tier are you? I ask. Maybe it's a bit rude to ask like that. 5, Merchant responds promptly, brushing a speck of imaginary dust from her garments. 5, but she's still so small. I was thinking it would be a bit rash to place such important negotiations in the mandibles of an ant who was barely out of the Antacademy, but tier 5 is respectable. Merchant must have been accelerated by the colony, since she clearly isn't built for combat. Not regular combat, at any rate. And is 6 months enough for you to have mastered the skills required to handle such high-level negotiations? You know what I want you to do, right? Have I mastered these skills? Of course not, that will be the work of a lifetime. Am I qualified? Well, Enid Ruther thinks I am. That's quite persuasive. I have a lot of trust in Enid's opinion, and if she approves, it's hard for me not to. Enid has been the go-to person for this sort of thing, and we probably shouldn't have relied on her as long as we did. Actually, is it really a coincidence that this ant was born right at this moment? No matter how I look at it, surely it's too much of a coincidence that merchant pops out of an egg right about the time Enid becomes too old to keep working for the colony. Obviously the Brathian are doing some work on our behalf, but they don't negotiate directly for us. It's imperative that we have someone to handle situations such as these, and now, here she is. Could it be the invisible hand of Gandalf? Somehow, I doubt it. That bearded jerk doesn't seem to pay all that much attention to the minutiae of the dungeon, let alone my family. All right then, I suppose you'll have to do. I'm interested to see how it goes. You'll be in charge of negotiating a ransom fee for the captured Delvers with Green Mountain. I'm sure they want their people back, but I want a good price for them. It needs to hurt when they fork over their money. While you're at it, see if there's someone who can negotiate on behalf of the Church of the Path. We aren't prepared to ransom the priests back just yet, but we will probably have to eventually. A new OBS. In a strangely human display, the little ant rubs her front legs together. Well now, suddenly we're talking my language. With several smooth motions, she pulls something out of her cloak, snaps a claw and puts it in her mouth. When playing tunnel ball, there are certain levels of play. There's the hatchlings mucking about in the dirt, and then there's the professionals smashing each other to bits. She takes a contented puff on what I now see as a cigar, then sweeps it out of her mouth to tap the ash from the end. How hard do you want me to play? She says with a twinkle in her multifaceted eyes. Why in the name of heck is this ant smoking right now? Make them squeal. Merchant clacks her mandibles together joyfully. Oh, it will be my pleasure. Enid, just what have you created here? The old woman smiles broadly. I'm not sure exactly what you mean. 1706 people trading. Another negotiation with these ants. They were relentless, Alice had to give them that. Diplomats, as if monsters having diplomats wasn't an utterly absurd notion, had been sending daily messages via their Brathian merchant contacts despite being rebuffed every time. Green Mountain had, with some reluctance, rejected their price, and that was that. Hunting monsters was the right of every delver across Pangara, and the ruling council of the mountain had no intention of selling that right for any price. Yet now they apparently had another proposal, and the Brathian were kicking up a fuss. Once again, Alice Airy, the chief negotiator of Green Mountain, was forced to board a neutral vessel and endure the presence of a monster for no real purpose. As she boarded the ostentatious ship and made her way below deck, she idly wondered just what sort of proposal the monsters would put forward this time. Perhaps they wanted to up their offering. Such an astounding sum would surely bankrupt the ants, and perhaps it would be worth accepting just to make them suffer the cost. That had been a line of reasoning some of the more materially concerned members of the council had taken, but they had been outnumbered in the end. After being shown into the room in which the talks would be taking place, Alice was a little surprised to see there wasn't an ant in place ready and waiting for her. A little irked, she took her seat, raising a querying brow to the Brathian negotiator who had led her in, only to find the woman was gone. What was this, some sort of trap? Ha ha, no trap, I assure you of that. The voice that rang out from the door as it opened was strange. A little flat, a little wooden, but still somehow bouncing with personality. Any diplomatic talks were to be held with a reputable witness, Alice snapped. She turned, only to start as she found an ant had entered the room. Of course, that remains the case, the voice said as the ant clacked its mandibles, but we aren't here for diplomatic talks. We are here for something much more interesting. Unhurried, the ant stepped around the table and took its place on the other side, sliding onto the ant chair positioned there and removing the smart-looking hat it wore on its head. After inspecting and buffing out an unseen imperfection, the hat was placed carefully on the table before Alice had managed to pull her wits back together. What manner of creature was this? An audible ant. Such strange clothing and mannerisms, along with the glasses. Alice Airy, chief negotiator of Green Mountain, what a pleasure to meet you, the ant effused as it began to pull documents and papers from a satchel placed to one side. Your record is remarkable, I have to say. Very impressive. No Airy has ever served on the council, nor held a position of significant authority, but you have blazed a trail through hard work and talent. I respect that. Perhaps we could even say there's a little bit of ant about you. Ants couldn't wink. It was biologically impossible. And yet, I'm only joking, of course. I wouldn't want you to take offense, I know how the mountain feels about my kind. The ant reached into its coat and removed a gleaming, silver case that it snapped open to reveal 5 rolled cigars nestled within. Offering the case over the table, the ant said, "Do you smoke?" I've picked up the habit, and I have to say there's something about the scent that I find so tantalizing. It's like immersing my antennae in earth and fire. Would you care for one? What? No. Alice shook her head, trying to dispel the strange magic the creature had woven in such a short span of time. She slapped a hand down on the table firmly. If we aren't here for diplomatic discussions, then I will leave. Well now, there's no reason to be hasty, the ant laughed, withdrawing a cigar and snapping the case closed. The ant tucked it away before placing the chosen cigar in its jaws and snapping its claws to ignite the tip. As I said, there is something much more interesting to discuss here, business. There was something about the way the monster spoke that word that sent a shiver down Alice's spine. She refused to let her unease show. I have no interest. That is to say, Green Mountain has no interest in any sort of business deal with your kind. Under normal circumstances, I would completely agree with you. But in this instance, we can absolutely come to an agreement. You see, business is always possible when someone has something that someone else wants, and is willing to part with it for the right price. The little ant puffed on her cigar, her eyes twinkling. Right now, I have something you want, and I am very willing to part with it, for the right price. You see, a deal is more than possible. It was absurd, and Alice was more than a little tempted to walk out immediately. She would never be able to say what it was that kept her in that room, ROES. And what do you have that we might want? She sneered, folding her arms across her chest. I heard a few delvers had gone missing in the tunnels. Over 50, by last count. So what? Delvers went missing all the time. Long excursions into the dungeon came with risks and hazards. Some would return, weeks behind schedule after having survived a tumultuous adventure, others would never come back at all. We were wondering if you wanted them back. In an instant, the air around the ant had changed. No longer cheerful, no longer jovial and joking. It sat still, one claw on its cigar, thin trails of smoke winding up around its antennae. What? Alice said, maintaining her cool. We were wondering, the ant said slowly, tapping ash into the tray on the table, if you wanted your people back. As chief negotiator for Green Mountain, Alice Airy was no pushover. Her thoughts raced as she tried to understand the implications of what was happening here. Are you saying that you have captured them? That they're alive, very much alive, for the time being? Over 50 delvers just wandering the tunnels inside our territory, poor lost little lambs. We picked them up as a courtesy, and we thought it was natural to ask if you wanted them back. You'll give them to us? Alice sought to clarify. Of course we will, once you pay our price. One middle leg slipped inside the monster's coat and withdrew a small piece of paper that it placed on the table and slid across the surface. Reluctantly, Alice reached out, picked it up, and read the contents. Her eyes grew wide. You want this much for them? Have you lost your mind? Of course not, the ant almost purred. We want this much for each of them. The monster took its cigar and crushed it into the tray before rising from its seat. Obviously, you won't agree now. That's fine, I'll come again when we have 100 of your delvers. The price will have gone up, obviously. Then I'll come back when we have 200. Again, a rather sharp price increase can be expected at that time, I'm afraid. You think our people will just let themselves be taken? Alice stated, concealing the unease she felt. Something had changed down in the tunnels, but what? What was going on down there? Weren't the ants corralled into their nest, huddling in fear? Your people don't have a choice in the matter, the ant replied. All this time, you thought we were hiding for our protection, and in a sense, we were. What we really feared, is what would happen to you if one of your teams succeeded. The time for that fear is gone now. We are no longer the ones who have to be afraid. Then, the charm came back, so strong it was as if the lights in the room had brightened. Alice Airy, wonderful to meet you, truly a privilege. I'd love to shake your hand, but I wouldn't want to make you uncomfortable. Let's put it that way. They couldn't wink. They couldn't. I look forward to meeting you again soon. Please, reach out through our mutual friends if you want to talk. Any time at all, I'm all yours. Just like that, she was shown the door. 1707 a harder kind of sale. It wasn't easy for Merchant to get in touch with people from the Church of the Path. It wasn't easy for Merchant to find someone willing to admit that such a person even existed on Green Mountain. Which was so obviously absurd, with them having an entire cathedral dedicated to the faith in there, that she honestly respected their dogged refusal to speak. Of course, that didn't mean it was impossible. What Merchant knew, better than anyone else in the colony, was what money was, and most importantly, what it could do. Mistress Enid hadn't shied away from teaching her student about the darker possibilities of the marketplace. Money was an incredible thing. It held value so much greater than its practical use, or even its scarcity. It could be used to buy goods and services, but that was the most basic, most simple of its applications. Money had hands. It could open doors and windows that would otherwise remain shut, creating new possibilities and opportunities. Money had ears. It could buy information and knowledge that would otherwise remain totally inaccessible. Locked lips were everywhere in the world, but money was a master key. Perhaps most importantly of all, and least understood, money could speak. It could be a whisper, a murmur, dropped in the right place, at the right time. Or it could be a shout, a deafening burst of sound that commanded attention and respect, drawing the light and focus away from other, less deserving things. Understanding money and how to use it was how Merchant knew where the Grand Priest Alirvinting was staying. It was also how she knew that a message had been delivered to the priest this morning, hidden on the tray under his cup of tea. Knowledge she shouldn't have possessed. Access she wasn't supposed to have been granted. It was also how she found herself in a warehouse on the dockside of Green Mountain, seated behind a table in the far corner, sipping her own tea, and waiting. The people who had smuggled her in hadn't really known what they'd done, only that they'd been well paid not to know. Ignorance and silence. Just another two things that many did not realize were on the market. Perhaps she should have felt in danger, taking such a risk, coming to such a hostile place. Yet, she didn't, not at all. Safety, after all, was always for sale, even for her, even in a place like this. When a man emerged from the darkness, she wasn't surprised, and when he sat down at the table across from her, she wasn't afraid. Alirvinting, Grand Priest of the Path. Welcome, she said. Although she had never met him before, she was confident this was him. There weren't many allowed to wear those robes, and none of the others in the mountain who were had any reason to be here, speaking with her. This was not something I expected, the man said, as he drew back his chair and sat down. A civil discussion, with one of your kind. There was something about the eyes that Merchant had learned to identify. Some people were open with their distrust of monsters. They shied away, or their lip curled with disgust. She didn't mind that. Obvious reactions for people with deep-seated distrust for a kind of being that they had lived in fear of from the moment they grew old enough to learn they existed. She could work with those people, try to bridge the gap, try to create tenuous bonds that could strengthen over time. Or she could try to make them see her as something else, something other than a monster. But there were others, skillful enough to hide their true face. These were the merchants, the traders and the travelers with experience enough not to show what they were thinking on the inside. Most of the people she dealt with were like this, and it was much harder to tell who felt a strong prejudice against her kind and who didn't. She'd learned, there was always a tell. It was so much harder to lie through the eyes. From the day she had been born until now, Merchant had never seen a gaze so cold as the one Alirvinting leveled her way. She was not a person, she was barely an entity, in his eyes. He regarded her as less than a human would regard a pet cat, less than they regarded a table. There was both hatred and avarice in those eyes. Suddenly, Merchant didn't want to engage in her usual patter. She didn't want to perform, or engage in the subtle back and forth of negotiation. She would spend the absolute minimum amount of time necessary in his presence. We have one of your priests, she said flatly. Soon we will have more. If you want them back, this is the price. She took out the paper, slid it across the table, then retracted her leg lest it get too close to the thing sitting opposite. You expect us to pay ransom to retrieve our priests? Alir said as he reached out to take the paper. When he saw the number written within, his eyebrows climbed. Well now, that is hardly civilized. How the Church of the Path feels about us isn't something we worry about. You should, he said, crumpling the paper and dropping it to the floor. He leaned closer. Giving us ammunition to use against you is profoundly unwise. Rao Epsilon S. As if you would stop firing arrows just because we didn't shoot back, Merchant clacked her mandibles with distaste. I suggest you pass our message back to your superiors. I don't think your fellow holy men and women will feel all that comfortable in our presence. Is that a threat? Alir asked. No, this is the threat. If you take too long, we might figure out how to do to you what you do to us. I wonder how you would taste after being refined into an elixir, Grand Priest. Disgusting, I'm sure. The priest merely chuckled. You can try, I suppose. I assure you, it cannot be done, but news of your atrocities will surely spread far and wide. We are done here, leave. Perhaps sensing that she would have him removed if he didn't go of his own accord, Alir stood, then bowed, hand to his heart, before turning and striding out of the warehouse. As soon as he was gone, Merchant began to clean her antennae. Pulling her antennae through her elbow joints was soothing, and the routine calmed her mind. She said, I need a smoke. 1708 Reevaluate. What are those fools doing out there? Frederick demanded. If any of you are planning some sort of harebrained, idiotic assault, you better tell me right now so I can kick you in the face. Before him stood the heads of every team who remained in this section of the dungeon, but all they gave him were shamefaced looks and sideways glances. Except for Seamus, who raised his hand. Frederick felt a moment of despair. Even Seamus was planning some idiocy. What is it? Frederick asked, pinching his brow. I just thought I should point out, manager, that nobody will tell you anything if the reward is a kick to the face. Shut up. You think because you're as rich as the damned child emperor that you can start running your mouth. More than a few delvers shot envious, or even outright greedy looks at the experienced team leader in their midst, and Frederick immediately regretted his words. Seamus had gotten lucky and now had a tremendous amount of money coming his way, which had painted a massive target on his back. There was such a thing, after all, as too much money. Don't get distracted, you damned fools, the union manager growled, trying to get back on track. He pointed an accusatory finger at the group. How many teams do we need to lose herring off to try and seize a prize they have no chance of winning? Dozens of good men and women have been lost trying to do the impossible. I know it's a lot of money, all right. But damn it, are you pigs in a mud pit or are you flipping delvers? Fighting monsters you can't beat is for idiots and dead people. Too much money, that was the problem here. A tiny fragment of its carapace was enough for a delver to retire and live in luxury for the rest of their life. Even Frederick had been blinded by greed, trying to figure out a way to bring down the beast. 50 good people vanishing into thin air had convinced him otherwise. This was frustrating, for him, and for them. The largest prize in the history of delving was out there somewhere, so tantalizingly close they could practically taste it. A devilish creature to be sure, it had laid its bait perfectly. If Seamus and Elsie had returned with nothing but word of the creature, many would have been tempted, but not enough to try and hunt the monster. However, they had brought back that chunk of diamond and become filthy rich as a result. Now there was jealousy in the air, mixing with the greed and creating a heady mix thick enough to drive people mad. Why don't we all go? A voice called out. Frederick whipped around to see Rubia, hand on her hips and stubborn cast to her features. It's the prize of a lifetime. Small groups are never going to get the job done. If we don't all go, then we won't have a chance. The union manager felt a headache coming on. Rubia, by the blessed path and my own wizened mother, what are you talking about? That's a tier 8 mythic. Do you hear me? He looked around at the others, glaring at them, daring them to speak. Tier 8 mythic. No delver has taken down a prize like that since the cataclysm. Unless some of you are hiding an abyssal legion under your shirts, then you aren't strong enough to get the job done. The legion isn't here, but the Church of the Path might send suppressors, or Green Mountain could rouse the army, Rubia continued, refusing to be silent. With their help, we could have a chance. I don't see them here, do you? Frederick roared, losing his temper and throwing his arms in the air. I'm trying to stop you blasted fools from getting killed. Can't you see that? Seamus shook his head, and as Frederick glared at the others, they looked away, shuffling their feet or looking up into the air. Only Rubia met his gaze with a thick-headed, stubborn stare of her own. Ow. Bah, get out of here, all of you. In a few days, this excursion will be over and we're all heading back to the mountain. If any of you want to leave the camp, you can forget it. I'll be handing out no dispensation. A few protested, but his blood was up and he ran roughshod straight over them. I don't want to hear it. When you're ready to act like delvers and not wannabe heroes, then come and talk to me. As they all shuffled out, muttering amongst themselves, it was only Seamus who brushed himself off and came to speak with the manager. How bad do you think? Frederick muttered. Seamus grunted. 2/3 will be gone before an hour has passed. Mother's milk. I'm starting to hate that ant, Seamus. Why, it's not the monster's fault. 1709 Judgment. Of all the organizations separate from the free cities, kingdoms, empires, trade federations and territorial associations in the dungeon, the most well-known and impactful is the Abyssal Legion. Almost as ubiquitous as the Church of the Path. Its origins are lost to time, though the church itself claims to have arisen during the Rending. To some, it seems absurd that a faith based around the dungeon as a proving ground and test of spirit could arise while that same dungeon was tearing the world apart, but to others, it makes perfect sense. Why not seek out meaning in the destruction? Better to think that the death and suffering were for a purpose rather than random and pointless. Although not tied to any other authority, the Church of the Path makes its headquarters within the Grand Cathedral in the Golden City. Preaching that the dungeon exists to serve and uplift the old races of Pangara, it has spread to almost every quarter of the world. Excerpt from Societies and Organizations of the Dungeon, by Alous. We are here to execute the will of the Church. Silent and unmoving, rank upon rank of soldiers, dressed in armor gleaming with pure silver and draped in robes of white listened intently, their discipline never wavering. Do not waver in your faith, do not stray from your purpose. If there are doubts in your heart, crush them without mercy. Even the slightest crack in our armor will render it ineffective. Dismissed. Feet stomped on the decks, rank by rank, the Judgment Battalion began to file down the gangway and onto the dock. The people of Green Mountain showed proper deference as they gave way, allowing the flawless lines of soldiers to enter the city. From the deck of the ship, War Bishop Pearson watched as the men and women who served under his leadership marched, heads high and souls afire, eager to serve the commands of the Church. Eyes hard, he waited until the last rank had disembarked before doing so himself. Trusting that the auxiliaries would see to the care of their weapons and shields, he followed the last of his troops, eyes and ears open to the happenings on the mountain. It had been years since Pearson had been home, but not much had changed since his last visit. A martial people, living in the shadow of one of the largest monsters the dungeon had ever seen, locals were expected to live and act a certain way in regards to the dungeon. It was the ever-present enemy, a shadow that lay over the brightest of days. Of course, they welcomed the arrival of the soldiers of the path. Cheers rained down on the battalion, along with flowers hurriedly cut from gardens, while others laid down their cloaks in the soldiers' path. Though, along with the celebrations, Pearson detected an air of tension and anxiety, like a worm burrowing within an apple. Of course, that was to be expected to some extent. A Judgment Battalion wasn't dispatched for nothing, there had to be a target, which meant danger was nearby. Yet he was certain it went deeper than that. Something was going wrong here. After seeing that the troops were billeted comfortably and the captains were assured of their duties, War Bishop Pearson strode away, heading to his first appointment. High on the mountain, almost to the highest inhabited levels, he found a residence carved from gleaming white stone. Dripping with luxuries and sparkling in the mana-enhanced light of the fourth, it was fit for a king, or a noble lord at the very least. Cringing attendants took his name at the entrance before checking he was allowed entrance. When he was granted permission, they apologetically asked if he could remove his armored boots before stepping inside. Pearson ignored them. Shouldering past those who timidly tried to step in his way, the war bishop marched within, not caring if he stepped a little harder onto the dappled marble floor than was strictly necessary. On the wide balcony, and under an arch of perfectly formed stone that extended a dozen meters away from the edge of the manor, he found who he was here to see. Grand Priest Alir Vinting, he said. The man in question rose from his couch, placed his hand on his heart, and bowed in welcome. War Bishop Graham Pearson was disgusted. It is most wonderful to see you here, War Bishop, Alir said, smiling. I am gratified the church saw fit to act so expeditiously in regards to my report. Pale blue eyes as cold as glacier ice stared unblinking at the Grand Priest. How much is the church paying to keep you in this residence, Grand Priest Vinting? He asked. Alir blinked, then restrained himself from rolling his eyes. He hadn't met this particular war bishop many times, but Pearson's reputation was well known within the ranks of the higher-ups in the church. With his shining gold hair severely pulled back and tied at the nape of his neck, there was neither a hair out of place nor a single smudge upon his armor. Everything about him spoke of rigid control and uncompromising standards. On a mission of such importance, I deemed it necessary that I take up a residence that did not besmirch the prestige and authority of the church, Alir said, his smile tightening. Ra. Ob Epsilon S. Pearson said nothing for a moment, merely looking around him. Paintings, cloth woven with shimmering golden thread, the rug formed from the hide of a powerful monster. Then there was the view. From this high, the waters of the Forth twinkled like a jewel, distant mountains rising like titans to hold up the sky above. I deem it to be excessive. You will cut short your stay and be billeted with my troops. War Bishop Pearson's tone brooked no argument, the matter was final. Alir smothered his reflexive wince and maintained the smile on his face, while suppressing the spark of anger in his chest. You do not have that authority. In the field, I outrank you. Alir looked about himself, brows raised. Do you consider this the field? Is there a danger present I am unaware of? Pearson finally allowed himself the slightest of smiles. Men and women of the judgment battalions are expected to maintain battle readiness at all times outside of the cathedrals. The moment we step beyond the cathedral gate, we are in the field. If you don't agree, feel free to take the matter up with the Archbishop upon your return. They both knew Allier was in no position to directly refuse. If he didn't want to move, Pearson could pick him up like a child and roll him down the mountain like a ball. Rejoice, the war bishop said. I will personally see to it that the funds saved are distributed to the widows and orphans who have lost their family members to the monsters. In this way, we light the path. Grand Priest Allier Vinting swallowed the anger now threatening to rise up and choke him. We light the path, he echoed, bowing to hide his expression. Pearson didn't look as if he was taking any pleasure in the other man's suffering, and Allier was certain that he wasn't. Now, the war bishop said, tell me about this creature I am here to kill.